Chapter 45-75. Press over. When the words of Jian Wushuang fell, the disciples of life in the palace behind him were startled. Palace, the palace master, don't let them board the ship, just press them over, isn't it great? A life shrine disciple said stutteringly. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and ignored him, but stared at the old man headed by the refugee with a grim expression, with an indifferent expression. Ha ha. And the old man with a sad face laughed suddenly. Little baby, tell me, how do you tell? The old man slowly stood up, the sadness on his face was gone, instead he stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth, showing a touch of greed in his eyes. Along with the old man's showdown, the refugees behind him also got up and stood up, with a tinge of light on their faces. Leader, don't talk nonsense with this little baby, kill them all and steal their space battleship. A refugee stood behind the old man and smiled vaguely. Jian Wushuang took a scornful look at the old man and said lightly, if I'm not mistaken, have you just ransacked others? The blood on your body is all other people, and it's hard not to be seen. Is that so? The old man narrowed his eyes, glanced down at the blood on his body, and seemed to remember something. He said, there was a couple just now, they just needed to trust us, but they just didn't know it, so the old man had to kill her aunt and daughter in front of the man, and then crush the man's body inch by inch. In the end, the man couldn't bear it and died. At this point, the old man raised his head and looked around Jian Wushuang and Lung Rushuang's face next to him, revealing a trace of obscenity, and said hushingly, little doll, presumably you are a smart person, wouldn't you be so uninteresting? As soon as the words fell, he hadn't waited for the sword Wushuang to move. The cold frost beside him was already furious, and the long whip in his hand appeared out of nowhere, blasting the void directly, spreading for thousands of miles, and beheading towards the old man. Ha ha ha, you little girl, it's hot. The old man laughed loudly, soaring into the sky, revealing repairs. A half-step invincible and supreme momentum spread suddenly. With just one flick of his finger, he flew off the frosty long whip. Half-step invincible supreme. Suddenly, the blood of Supreme and other people sank. You should know that with the fall of the Gava Supreme, the cultivation of the entire Palace of Life is the highest, but it is only the breakthrough of the Bloodstream Supreme. But the Bloodwave Supreme only stepped into the half-step Invincible Supreme, and this old man, looking at his strong breath, is like a prison in the deep, apparently already an old-fashioned half-step Invincible Supreme. Lord, let me do it. Bloodwave Supreme took a deep breath, his expression dignified. No need. Jian Wushuang shook his head, squinted at the old man, and spit out two words indifferently, brute. Immediately, Jian Wushuang stepped into a sword light and killed the old man. Miles of clouds have been cut. Between heaven and earth, there is only one line left. Oh! Feeling this biting sword, the old man was shocked at first, then immediately dismissed. Medium and supreme, dare to arrogant in front of me? The palace master is careful. Blood Sovereign saw Jian Wushuang rush to the past, and his heart was equally shocked. Sword warriors have separated the divine power from the universe for thousands of years. The impression of Bloodwave Supreme on sword warriors staying is still the elementary state of supremacy, and its strength is at the highest level. Today Jian Wushuang, although breaking through the medium supreme, but want to come a half-step invincible supreme, still far behind. Even the coldness was frosty, and the heart was clenched fiercely. The sword is unparalleled, leaving the magical universe for too long. Many people have long forgotten his combat power. In the audience, only the king of Jujie looked indifferent, and he was not worried about Jian Wushuang at all. He knows the sword unparalleled combat power. Today's sword unparalleled cannot match the invincible supremacy, because it has not been tried, but looking at the world, no one exists under the Invincible Supreme, can support 10 moves. Even the most powerful of the 5-marked virtual honor of the virtual universe, the fucking, was beheaded by the sword unparalleled 10 strokes. What is this old man? Ha ha ha, Junior, if you don't know anything, just blame the old man. The old man laughed wildly, and before he finished speaking, the laughter came to an abrupt end. A skull broke away from his neck and flew high. Immediately afterwards, his body was broken like a mirror that fell to the ground fiercely. You, how can you? The face of the old man's skull surged to the extreme, and looked at Jian Wushuang in horror. "My lord, the younger ones don't know Tarzan, they don't know the real person. You have a lot of adults, raise your expensive hands, and let the little ones." He frantically begs for mercy, hoeing like garlic. Noise. The sword Wushuang proudly stands in the void, flicks his fingers, and instantly a sword orn shoots out from his fingertips, piercing it. Boom. The next moment, the old man's head shattered like a cracked watermelon, and he could not die anymore. Seeing this scene, the desire to rush out of the blood wave is supreme, the action is stagnant, and a flash of dullness flashes in both eyes. And those refugees who followed this old man saw that they had died for a while. Soon. Oh! The refugees screamed and fled. Jian Wushuang patted his right hand gently to his waist, and suddenly the sword of Tai Luo came out of the sheath instantly. Like the same white dragon was shocked, he rushed up and killed them one by one. After a while, the taro sword was automatically sheathed and fell into the taro sword sheath. The sword has no twin body shape, and has returned to the deck of the spaceboat from the void space. Bloodwave Supreme then slammed a shock response, grabbed the arm of Jian Wushuang, and never had a disorientation, asking, "Palace, do you have the same combat power as the Invincible Supreme?" "I don't know. I guess it can be a battle." Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. This is not his arrogance, but confidence. Today's sword unparalleled, not only broke through the middle supreme, the cultivation is skyrocketing, and then sealed the land of the gods, but also received all the spiritual insights given by the main Tao of the Supreme Palace of Life Shrine. He refined this insight every day, his strength almost doubled with the day, the water rose. The reason for his uncertainty is that he has not yet had a chance to truly fight the Invincible Supreme. Patriarch ancestors and the Supreme Ones among the Supreme Lords, such as the Supreme Master, the sword unparalleled for the time being, the gap is very large, but the weak Invincible Supreme such as the Black Master Supreme, the Master of the Daewoo Temple, the sword unparalleled is really confident and can match it. World War I. Okay, let's go. After a moment, Jian Wushuang returned to the cabin. The entire fleet of the Life Shrine continued to sail, leaving a place after a shuttle. In the endless starry sky, they are getting closer and closer towards the far north where the 9 restricted areas are located. Chapter 4576. After 3 months. The space fleet of the Temple of Life gradually broke away from the bustling and came to the far north of the universe. The temperature plummeted at the cliff-like speed, and a thick layer of frost was deposited on the entire deck of the spacecraft. In front of it is a cold and lonely starry sky. 9 galaxy-like galaxies hover quietly in front of it, exuding a icy cold. Of the 9 restricted areas, the 3 dragons, and unicorns already accounted for 3 of them, plus the tyrants of the tyrants and the descendants of the dark demons occupied 2, leaving only 4 restricted areas. Gumming Cave and the tombs of the gods have long been eliminated by Jian Wushuang in their expectations. Therefore, there are only 2 choices, the Emperor's ancestral site and the Sad Land. Jian Wushuang looked at the 2 restricted areas, his eyes flashed, and he began to think carefully. These 2 forbidden grounds were formed before the universe was opened, and no one can know what is inside them. Therefore, the degree of danger does not make any difference to Jian Wushuang. "Palace, I think it would be better for us to go to the Emperor's site," Bloodwave Supreme said aside. "Oh, why?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrow and asked. Bloodwave Supreme heard a smile, shook his head and replied, "I don't know. There is a sense of intuition in it. It feels like this Emperor's ancestral site seems to have an opportunity to make a difference." "Well, then go to the Emperor's site." Jian Wushuang heard the words for a moment, then said dumbly. The spacecraft made a roar and headed towards the Emperor's ancestral site. Just when the spacecraft was about to reach the entrance of the galaxy leading to the ruins of the Emperor's ancestors, an ordinary disciple in the universe of the Life Shrine fleet suddenly fell to the ground with a stunned noise, his stomach turned up, and his mouth vomited. Vomit. Puff. Suddenly, countless pieces of flesh and blood were spit out from the disciple's mouth, including a finger-sized black corpse. "Brother Makino, what's wrong with you? What is this?" Suddenly, many disciples next to this disciple were startled, looked at him, there was a turmoil. Now about to enter the Emperor's ancestral site, all the disciples are tense, holding their breath and being tense. The sudden vision suddenly panicked them. What's wrong? Jian Wushuang frowned and looked back. I saw that the corpse jumped on the deck, and suddenly turned into a black rush, piercing the galaxy where the Emperor's site was located. The 9 forbidden areas are all small worlds developed independently, and the entrance to the passage is the center of the galaxy. At the moment, in the center of the galaxy at the site of the Emperor's ancestor, a back wearing a black suit stood with his hand on his back, stepping on a meteorite, hunting in his clothes. The whole man was full of indifference. Call out. The corpse fell on the shoulder of the black back, and then slid into the body along the gap of the collar. Jian Wushuang watched this scene, his brows gradually frowned. This back gives him a familiar feeling. Next moment, the back of the black man turned slowly, his gaze looked at Jian Wushuang, and he spit out 2 words without expression, mist double. As the voice fell, the back of the black man's face also emerged from the shadow. This person, he is the Emperor of the Refining Gods, 8 Desolate Lord. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's heart sank and his pupils shrank. How did this person appear here? I saw Ba Huangshu staring at Jian Wushuang indifferently, and said, Fog Shuang, I will be here, didn't think of it. As early as your one, disguised as the Red Whale Gang leader, mixed into the 87th place. When there was a crack, the seat was faintly aware of it. After the war began, the seat finally confirmed that it was you. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and did not answer. To this day, he can already guess that the reason why the 8 deserted emperors appeared here must be when the war began. The 8 deserted emperors secretly put down a corpse and followed him while he was not paying attention. Track. What's wrong? Who is this person? Behind the sword Wushuang, there was a shock. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and pressed it down, signaling the disciples of the Palace of Life to be quiet, immediately raised his head, stared directly at Ba Huang's and said calmly, Yabaraki, what do you want now? What do I want? Ba Huang heard a cold snorting sound, a sudden anger on his face, angrily, Mist Shuang, this seat thinks that you are not thin. You killed the elders and sons of Godscythe. This seat has not been held accountable. This seat has also personally sent you to the position of the Lord of the Refining God, making you a pinnacle of peaks, which should be for you. This seat has a lot of it, all given to you, but how did you cultivate Shenzong to me? Do you still remember Elder Moose Wind? How did he treat you in the first place? He did everything to protect you in front of this seat. I refined Shenzong, who has treated you badly? How about you, set the whole refining gods and disregard, betray the empty universe? This seat asks you, can you feel a bit of guilt? In the end, the sound of Ba Huang Xuanzuan sounded like a thunder, banging, deafening. Jian Wushuang heard a word of silence for a second or two, and after a short while, took a deep breath and replied, sorry. The Lord of the Refining God heard a cold snorting sound, his eyes flickered, and he replied, Mist Shuang, now that the divine power universe has been defeated, and there is no possibility of a comeback, this seat will finally give you a chance. As long as you cast away the dark and cast the light and kill all the people behind you, you will forgive you for all the previous actions. You are still my new Lord of Refining the sect, how about it? As soon as this remark came to an end, the Master of the Refining stared at Jian Wushuang as closely as possible. As long as Jian Wushuang dared to say the word rejected, he immediately started his hands. Jian Wushuang heard the words expressionless, and slowly held the hilt of the Tai Luo divine sword. 8 shortages, it's useless to say more, 1 battle. This remark already represents the answer of Jian Wushuang. Stubbornly stupid. Ba Huang Xuanzuan snorted coldly, and a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes. Mist Shuang, then you will be buried with divine universe, boom. Suddenly, Ba Huang Xuanzuan stepped on his feet, and the meteorite at the bottom of the foot shattered instantly. And his whole person has turned into a streamer, bursting towards the sword unparalleled. The momentum of the 6-mark vanity was released all the way, just like the raging sea and the smashing waves. Extreme blood, I stopped him, and you brought the disciples of life to the tragedy. Jian was eyes narrowed and he pulled the sword out of the sheath. After saying this, Jian Wushuang directly turned into a practicing swordman that runs through the world, and killed towards the 8 desolate deities, 8 wastelands, 6 marks, and the divine universe are invincible supreme. This is the sword incomparable, the first time invincible to the enemy. Fu Jun, seeing cold like frost, his face suddenly changed, and he wanted to rush out. Alas! A big hand caught the frosty cuff. The Bloodwave Supreme expression was dignified, and he shook his head. Mrs. Palace, we can't intervene in this battle. Staying here will only drag the palace. Listen to the palace, let's go to the land of tragedy. The voice dropped, and Bloodwave Supreme directly manipulated the spacecraft, turned the bow, and a roar shot toward the sad and sorrowful land next to the Emperor's ancestral site. Chapter 4577. The two men, Zhenjian Wushuang and Bahuang Xuanzuan, were like two meteorites burning with flames, and they hit each other fiercely. A violent explosion came out, and then, a figure was seen, flying backwards, drawing a long straight line in the void, and pulling out a long gully. The person who flew upside down is Zhen Wushuang. Is this the power of Invincible Supreme? The sword of Wu Zhenshuang was overflowing with golden blood, and the mouth of the tiger was trembling with anger and blood. I have to say that the power of the Invincible Supreme is far beyond the ordinary Supreme. Even if it is just a hit, it is not comparable to the ordinary Supreme. Today's sword is unparalleled. It can be said that it is not exaggerated to be the Invincible Supreme, but he is just not an adversary in the face of a random blow from the 8 desolates. Want to escape? The 8th desolation hummed coldly, looking at the fleet of life shrine rushing towards the sorrowful cave, and a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes. Although he didn't know what was in the land of sadness, the keen intuition from the 6-marked vanity told him that if he let this group of people escape from the land of sadness, he was afraid that he would no longer be able to slay him and had to sit. Wax. Go with. He waved his right hand, and suddenly in the void behind him, a tall corpse with a pale face and eyes like rotting grapes came out from behind him. This corpse is also a 6-marked corpse. Suddenly, the corpse stepped on, and suddenly pulled out a residual image in the void, rushing towards the life shrine space fleet that was less than 100 feet away from the entrance of the path of tragedy. Wu Zhen saw this, and suddenly his eyes narrowed, and a star-splitting chopped it out, blocking the pace of the corpse. Immediately afterwards, located in the void behind Zhen Wushuang, Tai Luo's corpse took the same step, and with a flash of his body, he had already hit the 6-marked corpse fiercely. The high supreme breath emanates from the body of Taro God. During this period of time, Zhen Wushuang not only digested the spiritual insights given to him by the digestive tract daily, improved his strength, but also did not lose his possession of Tai Luo's corpse. Wu Tailuo's corpse is the top supreme practice. At this moment, there is no hindrance to recovery. Unexpectedly, he has reached the state of supreme. I saw Tai Luo's corpse turned into a sword, and the sword went away. The wind and thunder rolled directly and hit the 6-marked corpse directly, leaving a thick nail mark on the surface of his body. Before the death of the Supreme Master Tai Luo, he could use the Top Master to repair the Invincible Supreme. Although it is only a corpse at this moment, with the fighting instinct, it is enough to resist the corpses of the 8 desolate lord. For Zhen Wushuang, this is enough. I saw that this 6-marked corpse was blocked by Tai Luo's corpse for a moment. The space warship of the Temple of Life had shuttled fiercely into the entrance to the path of tragedy. Zhen Wushuang saw this, and finally felt relieved. Now he can let go of the battle. Jack. The stunned and desolate emperor, seeing this scene, his face suddenly became iron blue. How can he not recognize? This corpse that Zhen Wushuang just sent out is just the corpse that Zhen Wushuang obtained at the time of refining the coffin of God Sek. Missed pair, it. The cold mang flickered in the eyes of Shu Bahuang Shuzun, and he shot with both hands. A large amount of virtual force gathered in his hands and turned into 2 dark of light, slamming towards the sword unparalleled. Good job. Yang Zhen Wushuang's big sleeve flung, without any fear in his eyes, but the war intentions surging to the extreme. At the position of his eyebrow, a purple Sichuan word appeared faintly, like blood dripping, his eyes turned into the bright color of pale gold, his blood rolled, his muffled sound like a hammer. This is an anomaly that spawns chaos overlord to the extreme. Battle. The word was spit out by Zhen Wushuang's open mouth. In the next moment, The whole person has been transformed into a dawning swordman, turning heaven and earth into a line, and instantly beheaded towards the 8 desolate emperors. Carved insect tricks. Wu Bahuang Shu Zun hummed with an expressionless expression, and flew up to meet him, fighting with Jian Wushuang. Huh. One after another the roar came from the encounter between the two, as if 2 wild beasts were fighting. Open the sky. Cut star. Yong Yi. Breaking dawn, one after another, the sword masters that had made Jian Wushuang slay countless enemies, cast out from the hands of Jian Wushuang. However, it is useless, everything is useless. Shu Bahuang Shu Zun's hands surging forcelessly, as if holding 2 thunders in his hand, directly destroying them, crushing them as much as possible. In the blink of an eye, the two fought over 100 moves. Is this the power of Invincible Supreme? He was slammed back and forth by one palm, and Jian Wushuang, who had cracks on his body, uttered a marvel in his mouth. A trace. He is far from the ultimate state of invincibility, and there is always a gap. This seemingly small gap, but in fact it is like a of nature, is a gap that he can never cross in a short time. However, Jian Wushuang was astonished in his heart, but he didn't know how much stormy sea surged in his heart at the moment. According to the conversion of the realm of the virtual universe, Jian Wushuang's cultivation is now a realm, but it is only a 2-mark virtual honor, and he is a 6-mark virtual honor, standing at the peak of the entire universe. Although in the confrontation just now, Bahuang Xuanzuan did not use those earth-shattering killing moves, but the power of the shot was enough to kill all the Xuanshan below the level of 6-mark. However, Jian Wushuang, although suppressed by him, how can there be a slight danger of life and death? Howling. If this sun does not kill, it will become a confidant of the virtual universe in the future. Thought of this, there is a sense of killing in the eyes of Bahuang Xuanzuan, and he no longer intends to keep his hand, but wants to set his sword directly to death. Mist Shuang, let's die. This seat has given you the opportunity to choose another camp, but you don't cherish it. You must blame this seat for being ruthless. He Bahuang Shu Zun spoke coldly, and in his hands, a small whirlpool appeared suddenly, and endless virtual power began to condense. A smashing force of destruction destroyed the atmosphere, crushing the eternal void. And Jian Wushuang has already directly cast his biggest killing move before then. Taro Sword Code times 5th Style times Taro. Boom. In an instant, the sky's sword rushed into the sky, shook the world and broke through the clouds. The figure of the sword goddess of Qi Qing's shirt appeared behind the sword Wushuang, and with the sword Wushuang waving his sword, he cut off the mighty swordman with a wide wit. This sword has never been disadvantaged, and cut off all enemies in the world. This sword has been destroyed and has never been defeated. After the sword was cut out, Sword saw both without looking at the results, and the divine power broke out on both legs, and he quickly swept away towards the entrance of the path of tragedy. With this sword, he never imagined that he could slay the 8 wastelands, which is not what he can currently do. With this sword, he only needs to let Bahuang Xuanzuan have no time to take care of him, enough to make him step into the path of tragedy. Chapter 4578. Mist Double. Seeing Jian Wushuang blasting towards the entrance to the path of sadness and sorrow, Bahuang Zuzun's face was instantly furious. As soon as he wanted to get up and chase, he saw the Taro swordsman that Jian Wushuang had used his best efforts to hack, and slashed at him. That sharp sword, even if it is him, dare not belittle it. Damn! He Bahuang Xuanzun's face sank, and he had to stop and move his whole body power to resist this sword. Virtual art, Big Ghost's hand. Shu Bahuang's Huang sighed coldly, and saw his hands suddenly turn black, his nails skyrocketed, became sharp, and the body of corpse was exuded like smoke. Say to this seat. Yahuang Xuanzuan sighed coldly, and then suddenly pushed forward with his hands, grabbed the magnificent Tai Luo Zhenmang. I saw countless sparks splashing at the junction of Yahuang Xuanzuan and this sword. I was like a man with steel gloves, a steel gear that was moving at a high speed, and the figure of 8 desolation, backed by the sword, and his legs crossed a long mark in the void. This sword. Shu Bahuang's face was extremely furious. The last form of Tai Luo Zhendian was cut by Jian Wushuang. Although it could not bring him a deadly threat, it actually gave him a feeling like acupuncture. This is impossible for the Supreme Supreme to the Invincible Supreme. Say to this seat. After I was pushed back by 100 feet by this sword, Ba Huang Shuzuan stared at his eyes with a roar, and the black mang in his hands suddenly became a masterpiece. Next moment, this sword was directly tortured by Ba Huang Shuzuan. After Zun shattered the sword, Ba Huang Shuzuan gasped slightly, and a few beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Then, he lowered his head and looked into the palms of his hands, only to see that in his palm position, a wound with deep bones was cut and blood dripped. Missed double. The eighth desolation frowns and winces, one step to the entrance to the land of sorrow. Let's take a look at this seat, can you run? Lung Lung snorted, and Ba Huang Xuanzuan let out a false sense, spreading towards this sad and humble place. Only 3 breaths. Shu Ba Huang Shu Zun is like being hit by a heavy hammer, the whole person bends down and spit out a spit of blood, and his face becomes waxy yellow instantly. Big land. He looked up at this sad place, his eyes flashed with fear and fear. Just now he explored this sad place with false knowledge, just as if he had touched an unspeakable existence. In an instant, he broke up all his false knowledge. If he hadn't responded fast enough to cut off his fossard in time, I'm afraid that the unbelievable power has spread to him along with the fossard and destroyed him together. Mist Shuang, you have entered this terrible land, you are seeking your own way of death. He shook his head, and Ba Huangsun's complexion glanced towards this sad and hungry place, and immediately he stepped into a stream of light and quickly left here. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang and the people of the Temple of Life have entered this land of sorrow and have no doubt died. I don't need to continue smashing here to waste time. In the Wailing Land. Wu Jianwushu retracted the corpse of Tai Luo, stepped on it, and quickly rushed forward. This is a long passage, dark into the eyes. Even if Jian Wushuang used the medium and supreme cultivation to look forward, he still felt the darkness and visibility no more than 10 meters. Alas! Wu Jian Wushuang did not dare to release his consciousness at will, but kept flying forward. He could feel the cold walls on both sides of this long passage. The walls seemed to be engraved with something. Out of prudence, Jian Wushuang did not touch it randomly, but shot continuously forward. After the time of Wuxiangxiang, Jian Wushuang saw a light of ignition not far away. That is the flame of the engine burning when the spacecraft was traveling. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang stepped up and caught up with the spacecraft one step, followed by several steps, and landed on the deck of the first spacecraft. Palace Lord. Seeing Jian Wushuang return, the blood wave is supreme, cold as frost, etc., and immediately frowned. Father, are you okay? Cold as frost held the sword's palm, and asked with some concern. I'm fine, but you, have you encountered any danger along the way? Qi Jian Wushuang smiled and shaved the bridge of the cold frosty nose, and said, I heard that Jian Wushuang said it was okay, and everyone was relieved. The 8 desolate deities are divided according to the realm of the divine universe, but the invincible supreme exists. Nothing happened to us, we have been advancing in this channel, but it is strange to say that, at our speed, at least 3 or 4 galaxies have passed through, but they are still in this channel. Nodded coldly and replied. Jian Wushuang heard nothing and frowned. Sure, this passage is a bit weird. Palace Lord, we are not in the divine universe now. Each forbidden area is a small world opened up separately, so we cannot use the regular time to calculate the distance. Zun Shuebua said with a smile. Although he is inferior to Jian Wushuang in terms of combat power and cultivation, but the storms that he has experienced for so many years have made him more knowledgeable in academic experience than Jian Wushuang. Is that so? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, nodded immediately, and no longer thought deeply, and said, Go on. Yes. The space fleet at the Shrine of Life once again moved forward steadily. However, this journey is 3 days and nights. With the speed of the cosmic boat, even hundreds of star fields have also crossed, but at this moment are still in this dim channel. This time, even the Supreme Blood frowned, faintly aware that something was wrong. However, in this place of sadness and honor, no one dares to act lightly, but has to wait for the mood in his heart and wait quietly to completely reach the place of sadness and honor. For a long time, it was continuously stretched. On the deck, UU Reading Books www.ukanshu.com. Cold and frosty, and leaning on the sword's shoulders, let the dark wind in this passage constantly blow on the cheeks of the two. Fu Jun, now the magical universe will be all over sooner or later. What do you say, Chinga? What will the gods do in the beginning? Cold and frosty said, a bit lost. During the passage of this passage, they also seldom fell into peace. Being sullen and calm often makes people think a lot. This made Lung Rushuang think a lot, such as the children of the two, such as those who stayed in the early world of the gods. It's okay. In the early days, the terrain of the divine realm was remote, and the war will not spread there for a while. The first step of the virtual universe will only conquer the top forces. Wu Jianshou said with relief, touching his frosty hair. Besides, for my husband, I have informed them of the situation of the divine universe through the avatar. I stayed in the early days of the divine realm, and wanted to come up with their own solutions. Okay. Frosty nodded softly. As the two kept chatting, suddenly, there was a weird and low laughter in this extremely dark and narrow channel. This low laughter is like someone behind, silently approaching from the darkness, laughing in your ears. Instantly, Jian Wushuang's face changed, Han Maro exploded, and looked back violently. Chapter 4579. Who? Wu Jian Wushuang turned back sharply and looked behind him. I saw the dark deck behind him, and in my eyes was empty. Father, what's wrong with you? Cold and frosty holding Jian Wushuang's hand, he couldn't help asking a question. Jian Wushuang did not reply, but frowned tightly. Just now, he heard a weird low laugh behind his ears. But when he looked back, he saw nothing. Shuang'er, did you hear laughter just now? Wu Jianshou took a deep breath and asked Lung Rushuang. Ah, laughter. Cold and frosty, he could not help but hesitated, then shook his head and said, no. Husband, have you been too nervous lately? Is it? Wu Jianshuang frowned, and then looked around again, and found nothing abnormal. Could you really have heard it wrong? Maybe it is. Wu Jianshou smiled bitterly and sighed slightly. Recently, he is really under pressure. Well, let's go into the cabin, this channel is just a little weird. I thought for a while, Jian Wushuang proposed. It is good. Frosty nodded. Giggle tilde giggle. Jian Wushuang holding cold as frost, about to turn his head and approach the cabin. That spooky and weird low laughter sounded again in Jianwu's ears, like a ghost whispering in his ears. This time, Jian Wushuang heard clearly. Pretend to be a ghost. Jianwu's eyes were cold. With his strong sense nowadays, one mistake may be because the mind is too tight, but it is impossible to hear wrong for the second time. Next moment, God eyes, open. Countless blood surges and gathers into Jian Wushuang's eyes. In a short time, the sword of Wushan surged 3 inches in his eyes, and the purple Chuan mark appeared on the center of his eyebrow, as if the flame was beating. His expression was blank and his eyes swept away. However, the result disappointed him. I still see nothing. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's face could not help but swell and gradually drew up, holding his left hand as cold as frost, and his right hand quietly, holding the hilt of the sword of Tai Luo. Feeling the warmth from the hilt of the Tai Luo divine sword, Jian Wushuang's heart was slightly at ease. He stared tightly forward without notice. Scratching in the dark behind him, a pair of wrinkled, dry-skinned hands, stretched out silently, tremblingly patted on his shoulder. Hiss. For a moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were frozen, and he turned his head to look instantly. I saw behind him, pale cold as frost looking at him with a smile. Shuang'er. Wu Jian's brows frowned, wasn't it cold as frost beside him? No. Wu Jianshou looked back fiercely, and saw Lung Rushuang looking in horror at the cold frost that appeared behind the two. Two as cold as frost. Are you looking for me? Cold as frost looked at Jian Wushuang with a smirk, and the corners of his mouth slowly opened. Grind until the entire mouth reached the back of the ear, exposing a mouth. She reached out her hand and yanked it towards Jian Wushuang's eyes. Look for death. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were cold, his right hand had been holding the tailored Excalibur with the hilt of the sword, and it instantly emerged from the sheath, turning into a stunning white rainbow, fiercely chopping forward. I haven't waited for this sword to split. I saw cold as frost like a melting candle, eyes, nose, and mouth began to melt quickly, and after just a few breaths, it turned into a thick pool of white liquid on the ground. Giggle. Giggle. The weird sound of crying and laughing gradually disappeared. After a short while, the deck of the spacecraft once again turned into a group of dead silence. Wu Jianwushu retracted the Taro Excalibur with a frown. Isn't he weird even before he really enters the land of tragedy? Father, what is that? Frozen as frost asked. I don't know. It may be caused by the grudges in this sad place. Wu Jianshou shook his head and said. Crackling. At this moment, the cabin door was opened, and Bloodwave Supreme stepped forward hurriedly. Palace, something happened. Bloodwave Supreme expression was heavy. What happened? Wu Jian's eyelids jumped. Gongzhu, you'll know when you follow. After finishing speaking, Xuanbo Supreme took the sword unparalleled and walked towards the cabin where the disciples of Life Shrine rested. A moment later, Sword Wushuang arrived in the cabin. I saw a bed on which a disciple of Life Shrine was lying, with the giant axe, the Heavenly Supreme, the 9 kings and other people standing next to them, all of whom had an ugly face. Palace Lord. Palace Lord. Seeing Jian Wushuang coming, Giant Axe and others turned back. Wu Jianwushuang nodded toward them as a response, without any nonsense, walked directly towards this disciple. I saw the 5th series master of this Life Shrine disciple dominated the repair. At this moment, he was tightly bound to the bed by the blood strength bloodbinding technique. The disciple has dilated pupils, his face is gray, and the expression on his face is strange. Giggle. Giggle. He didn't open his mouth, but there was a sound of crying and laughing coming from his throat. And he was stupid. He didn't notice it at all, but he kept his eyes open. It's this laugh again. Wu Jianhuang's face became ugly, and a bad premonition surged in his heart. Let me see. Shu took a deep breath, and Jian Wushuang strode forward. Photo. He stretched out his fingers, and Jian Wushuang nodded on the disciple's brows. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to release his divine power and probed his body. Zun originally was like a dead body, a stupid-looking disciple, suddenly reached out his hand, grabbed Sword's wrist. You came. Come quickly. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Giggle giggle. Weird cries and laughter from the disciple's throat. Immediately after that, the scene that Jian Wushuang met on the deck again. I saw the body of this disciple, like a fast-burning candle, starting from the hair and melting little by little into a thick pool of white foam. Damn. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's face was gloomy to the extreme. Weird. Too weird. He thought that the place of tragedy would be very dangerous, and he was even prepared to let go of the war, even if he died. But he did not expect that this sad place would be so weird. Visible danger, no matter how strong it is not terrible. There is always a way to cope. However, the strange phenomenon that appeared in the place of sadness and misery was invisible and intangible, and there were no traces to be found. The unknown is always the hardest to deal with. What about other disciples? Is there anything unusual? Qi Jian Wushuang turned his head and looked at Bloodwave Supreme and others, and said that his face was not very good. Zun Shuebwa Supreme and others also did not look very good. A disciple of the Life Shrine died so openly in front of them, but they said nothing, not even a trace could be captured. Chapter 4580. In the passage of the quiet and sad place. Dozens of spacecraft are marching quietly. I was swallowed by the roar of the engine in this immense absolute darkness. Return to the Lord of the Palace, other disciples have not found any abnormalities. Bloodwave Supreme replied slightly. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded his head and was about to get the attention of Bloodwave Supreme. What? A terrifying scream screamed, and the space fleet behind him suddenly blew. Screaming in this dark and silent passage, it seemed to be so extreme. Wu Jianhuang's face changed instantly, his body flickered, and he swept directly towards the spacecraft behind him. Zun Shuebwa Supreme and others looked at each other, their faces were ugly, and they quickly followed. A moment later, in the cabin of the 9th spacecraft, Jen Wushuang saw the female disciple who was screaming. I saw the female disciple trembling, her shoulders trembling, her face pale, and she stretched her fingers toward the glass window of the space capsule, her voice terrified. Palace, Lord, someone outside. Someone. Yang Jen Wushuang stared, but it was dark outside the glass. This made Jen Wushuang's face gloomy. You tell me just now. Wu Zhen said without expression on both sides. It is good. The female disciple flashed a flash of memory on her face and began to narrate. Things are simple. Not long ago, this female disciple, originally called Su Yang, was practicing cross-kneeling in the cabin. When she was practicing, she encountered a bottleneck, and thought of asking her disciples who were higher than her, and giving directions. Subconsciously, she glanced into the glass window next to her. It turned out to be such a look, she instantly saw a scene that would make her unforgettable. I saw on the glass window, a face with a blushing face, affixed to the window, eyes hanging like rotten grapes, staring at her. Because the face is too close, the whole facial features become distorted and terrible. It was also the sudden appearance of the face that scared her into a slump and fell to the ground, screaming. After this female disciple finished speaking, her face still looked astonished. I know. Wu Jianhuang's face is not very good-looking. Ghosts make. They are not ordinary mortals, they are supreme gods standing on the top of this universe. The goblin demon monsters, in their eyes, are simply the ants among the ants. Master of Wushuang Palace, come over here, I have something to tell you. At this moment, Lan Lan, who had been silent, suddenly appeared. Okay. Wu Zhen Wushuang raised his eyebrows and followed Lan Lan out of the cabin. The two went to the deck, and Zhen Wushou stood with his hands up, and said, Girl Lan Lan, you can say anything. Lan Lan nodded, and did not continue to speak, but looked away, as if reminiscing about something. After a while, his expression gradually became dignified and said, Zhen Wushuang, you know what our universe was before it was born, what does it look like? Wu Zhenshuang heard a word and said that he had never really understood the matter before the universe was opened up. But hear the details. Wu Jianwushuang reached out and made a pleased gesture. My master once suspected that our universe is just a cycle. Reincarnation? Zhen's brows frowned. Yes. Tong Lanlan exhaled deeply and said, it is reincarnation. According to my master's conjecture, before our universe civilization was born, other civilizations may have been born in this universe. He is just this civilization. For some reason, it was destroyed after all, and the universe returned to chaos. Once again, after a long time, the universe has restarted, giving birth to new life and giving birth to a new civilization. He is our civilization now. Yang Jian Wushuang frowned when he heard the words. Everything Lan Lan said was not impossible. He believes that the speculation of God of the earth is not groundless. My master once came to explore these two forbidden places. Unfortunately, my master kept silent about this experience, and only occasionally, I mentioned it inadvertently. According to my master, the emperor's ancestor seemed to bury an extremely powerful corpse that he could not even see through. The age of this corpse is even older than our universe. This sad place, according to the occasional mention of the master, seems to be the last place to fall in the last universe. Zhen Wushuang, if this place of tragedy is really like my master said, this is the place where the last universe era fell, then there must be countless characters from the last universe era, and they are buried here together. Lan Lan has not finished speaking. Suddenly, in this quiet passage, a strange song came out. God is dead, the devil is gone. Everything is in the dust and nothingness. Fu Tsangtian, weep alone. Singing like this, it seems that there are countless gods crying, distant, faint, with a bit of. Suddenly, Zhen Wushuang looked up sharply. However, he hadn't waited for Zhen Wushuang to run his divine power, to see what happened. Suddenly grief came from his heart, and a sorrowful meaning rose in his heart. That is a sorrow of vicissitudes of life, a despair of all kinds of despair, a sadness of loneliness and solitude. Wu Mingming only sang, but under this sadness, Zhen Wushuang couldn't bear a sore nose for a while. Crackling. That was the sound of water dripping on the deck. Yu Kanchu www. Ukanshu. Com Chi Jian Wushuang looked at her, and saw Lan Lan staring blankly at the starry sky, not knowing when, she was already in tears. Girl Lan Lan. Chi Jian Wushuang forcibly suppressed the sadness in his heart to destroy him, and tried to call Lan Lan. However, Lan Lan was as if stagnant, not even aware of it. Faintly, Jian Wushuang felt a wet face on his face, and he reached out his hand, only to find that his face was also covered with tears. He could feel the sadness as if he had turned into a pair of big hands, holding him tightly around his neck, and dragging him into a place of no end. Pretend to be a ghost. Wu Jianshou bit his tongue tightly, and for a while, the pain came from the tip of his tongue, making him slightly awake. Howling to endure this discomfort, the sword unparalleled stepped into the cabin. I saw the blood in the cabin of the Supreme, the Great Axe, the King of Nine Calamity, and so on, or an ordinary disciple, including cold as frost, all looked like a devil, and stood in the cabin dull. Damn! Chi Jian Wushuang clenched his fists, and then, he could no longer resist the sorrow, his eyes were black, as if falling into an endless abyss. In the narrow, long, and quiet path of the sorrowful land, a dead silence was restored again, leaving only the song that was crying like a demon, but also like a low laugh, ringing back and forth, strange and eerie. Chapter 4581. The mist mixed with black-grey silk threads was scattered on Jian Wushuang's face with the wind. His intangible but qualitative feeling made him realize his current situation. Yokohama's cosmic boat traveling through the stars disappeared, and all the disciples in the Temple of Life disappeared. Zun's intense uneasiness prompted Jian Wushuang to open his eyes, and the eyes were extremely dark with the raging wind. It seems that the extremely dark shadows that existed in ancient times obscured everything. Even if the sword master Wu Shou displayed his magical power, he could only see the area that is a few feet away. Where is this place? Have I come to the land of tragedy? Jian Wushuang murmured softly, but he remembered that he was in the cosmic boat just now, but he was in this strange world at the moment. After thinking for a moment, he held up a pile of sand on the ground with his hands, and he saw through the golden eyes that the sand was not black, but a rough white substance covering a layer of golden halo. The long and twilight-like sound of the bell in the morning passed through the distant past, coming from a distant past. In this strange environment, Jian Wushuang was horrified. He quickly lowered his figure and looked at the chaotic distance. The next moment, the extreme darkness of chaos slowly rose and rose like a clear air. At the same time, with the extreme darkness fading, there were nearly 100 big suns rising at the same time. Even in this scene, even the unparalleled sword-making of the kingdom of God, is secretly shocked. Nothing else, just because this scene is too shocking. At this moment, these slowly rising big days are far more than 100 times larger than the big days in any part of the universe. At the same time, these big days are no longer pure and pure, but they emit purple-red giant mansions. Each side of the world has been dyed into a scary purple-red color by these nearly 100 rounds of big sun. With the extremely dark retreat, the long bells of the morning bell and twilight became more frequent and began to sound like war drums. The sadness of weeping like a cry is even more intimidating in this barren star universe. The various strange phenomena in front of his eyes made Jian Wushuang not act lightly. He already guessed in his heart that this is the place of tragedy. He is waiting, and his subconscious intuition tells him that everything here is just the beginning. Time is here. It has long lost any value. With the sky rising to the sky for 100 days, suddenly this ancient and desolate and sad place suddenly began to bloom with countless divine power. The sacred ancient divine power of Baju Dome filled the earth in an instant, followed by extremely pure and rich or golden, red blood fell like Hongyu. Where is the sword Shuang who is fully absorbed in thinking of such a come out, directly by countless blood took a cool look. The sword Wushuang, who was poured into a body, hurriedly displayed his magical power to open up a transparent barrier and hid it. Descending with the blood of God, there are countless huge limbs and broken arms that surround the ancient charm of God. The broken armor engraved with ancient cipher text is full of blood, and broken soldiers are even more uncountable. Chi Jian Wushuang became more and more shocked when he looked at it, and at the same time, he had roughly guessed the true meaning of this sad place. When the vast and boundless earth was filled with broken soldiers and corpses, the entire place of tragedy became a place of burial. The long cry of sorrow and demon resounded, as if heaven and earth were telling a lament. Wu Jianhuang's state of mind seemed to resonate with everything in this burial land, and began to move uncontrollably. Every one of the supreme gods who has the power to stun the ancients is lost here. I don't know. Jian Wushuang shook his head hard, and he began to find that his consciousness was affected. However, an even more incredible scene appeared. The corpse of the gods scattered on the ground rose and fell like clouds of smoke, and disappeared in a blink of an eye. In its place, the countless pounds of powers were crushed from a faraway place. Before the power of the gods arrived, the Sky Dome took the lead to start the large-scale crack collapse. Hargai originally hung over the sky for 100 days. At this moment, the purple feathers were born, transformed into a three-legged purple black enough to cover the sky. There are countless divine powers transformed into an incomparable great horror existence, or take the wind and the clouds, or 3 or 5 times, and go to this vast battlefield. The sky of heaven was smashed by divine power under their presence. This ancient world battlefield cannot bear the existence of this unimaginable giant engine, just the majestic and mighty divine power they radiated. They constituted the most extreme collision belonging to that era. The heavens and the earth were trembling, the sound seemed to be fixed. The sword is unparalleled and terrifying. The existence of the level of the universe is the most ordinary in this scene of tragedy. He can't imagine that when the gods of that level have been reached, what will they be for? On top of the chaotic sky, hundreds of three-legged purple swaying with black-purple tail feathers, projecting the extinct purple flames downward. Every beam of flame easily tears the rule road, leaving a violent and wanton atmosphere. There was no killing, and the ultimate battle began completely. The unimaginable divine power, even if it is only a trace, is enough to wreck the zombie of the virtual universe, and the invincible supreme even cannot survive for a long time. Divine soldiers fight, powerful to the extreme existence of the old and wild and ancient, with the purest fight, struggling to manipulate the divine soldiers to kill each other. Brightness is everywhere. There is supreme being. Use a long bow to shoot down the 3-footed purple Wu above the sky, and use the purple Wu corpse to throw the purest burst into the opponent. There is no existence, holding the phaseless Excalibur to fight against the enemy at the last moment and die together. There is nothing but generous death, and Didao laughs loudly before disappearing. On Wu Yanyan's battlefield, there was an extremely chaotic collision. Like the lament of the sea monster singing, it blew up in Jian Wushuang's mind. He stayed out of the situation, but seemed to be there. He wants to close his eyes, but his pupils are enlarged a little bit crazies. Lunatics, all lunatic. What's wrong with all these reincarnations? Even if it is absolutely impossible, can you escape the heavens? Jian's eyes were trembling, and blood was pouring from every pore. Whether the Taos in this world are Changsheng Dao or Killing Dao? I don't understand. Painful thoughts can't restrain divergence. The ever-building avenue of faith in his heart began to collapse uncontrollably. Are we all? If so, what's the meaning of the end result? It's just a way of dying. Never had the golden eyes of languidness disappear, and began to appear a touch of dullness. I want to sleep for a while. As the ultimate battle on the sky began to come to an end, all supreme beings disappeared. Jian Wushuang also slowly lowered his eyelids. Wu Tianqiong cried, the rules were broken, and the top road was returned to its original state. What do you mean by chasing for thousands of years, preaching for 10,000 years, and enlightening for 1,000,000 years? Like a clear spring, everything is reborn. A sound broke into my ear. Little guy, wake up. Chapter 4582. The lament in my ears gradually dissipated, replaced by a slightly cordial call. This call seems to have some magic power, drawing the swordless Wu Shou, which is almost dead, from the fallen consciousness. He opened his eyes reluctantly, and his eyes were clear and thin. I was sober for a moment, and the subconscious reaction caused the sword unparalleled to move back several feet, and watched the old uncle in white clothes with vigilance. An old with a clear face does not blame Jian Wushuang's impoliteness. He smiled and got up and introduced himself. "Hello little guy, I stop when I call." Without any paralysis, Jen Wushuang thought for a moment and then said, "Have met the old gentleman. Those who can appear here and are not the Temple of Life, these two items alone are enough for Jen Wushuang to raise the highest vigilance." At the same time, he also began to doubt whether the extreme battle that had appeared before was the old man in front of him. The old self-proclaimed stopper smiled and waved. "You and I meet here, you have a destiny, so you don't have to be restrained." Jen Wushuang was unmoved. After seeing the surrounding scenes, there was a moment of unconsciousness. Countless broken bones were buried or exposed on the ground, and the damaged soldiers and blood-stained armor were mostly buried by sand and stone. Even if the avenue disappeared for hundreds of millions of years, the incomparable pure divine power still protected their masters, just as it was then. The scene in front of him was as he had seen before. But the Supreme Being has all fallen. Is this the real place of tragedy? Jen Wushuang asked, wondering how to show his inner thoughts for a moment. When he stopped, he smiled a little, not counting his clear pupils, reflecting the scene above the earth. "You call it a place of tragedy, but in my heart, it is a place of burial gods. All go." The words that stop for a while are light, but at the end they show a bit of loneliness. Looked a little strangely and paused, because it was not difficult to hear from his words. The old-timer-like pause seems to have gone through that era, and has been living to the present. After seeing the scene, Jen Wushuang did not believe it anyway. There would be a supreme being to survive the ultimate battle. He seemed to be able to feel what Jen Wushuang thought, and he stopped to recollect from his memories and said, "The old man is willing to wait here, only to find the right person." "Who's coming?" "Me." Jen Wushuang didn't know how to make his position. He didn't wait for him to speak, and asked himself, "Little guy, why are you here?" As soon as this statement came out, Jen Wushuang became a little embarrassed. The divine power universe fell. As the new Life Shrine Palace Master, after careful calculations, he was ready to come to a place of sadness and energy, but these words came to his mouth. Bien didn't know how to speak. "I do nt think there is too much malice to stop at this time, but if you do nt leave them, I'm afraid to wave them to suppress them or expel them out." Jen Wushuang didn't dare to gamble on the risks he took. During this brief stalemate, Jen Wushuang suddenly realized that the 3 spaceships carrying the entire Palace of Life did not seem to have come to this side of tragedy. He trembled in his heart. The disciples of the tens of thousands of life shrines, but the last sustenance of the divine universe. If there is any loss, it will be a disaster for the divine universe. No, it won't. Jen Wushuang turned quickly to find the whereabouts of several spacecraft. Susha stopped and called him in time. "Little guy, what are you looking for?" As the voice dropped, he stopped and stretched out his hand, and the original dim sky seemed to float up and down, and a ripple rippled suddenly. Then, the space opened outward, and the cosmic boat that could balance with the star slowly sailed out of the crack, but the deadly silence on its deck did make Jen Wushuang tense for a moment. He is very clear. The dark channel leading to this sad and fertile land is so powerful that even the Supreme and others are deceived, and the weaker one is not sure that he died on the spot. Regardless of the time to stop saying hello, Jen Wushuang leapt to the deck, only a little relieved after seeing the scene in front of him. I saw that the Blood Pool Supreme and others all leaned on Juwei and fell asleep. From the long breath, there was no danger to their lives. Their realm is too weak, they resolutely enter the burial god's land. At least it is detrimental to the realm, and the soul is lost, and they become the nourishment of the burial god's land. Therefore, I have to let them fall asleep to avoid many ban. With the voice, came the straight and thin figure already standing behind Jen's body. Listening to the explanation, Jen Wushuang didn't hesitate, turned and arched his hands, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Lao, for your help, and the younger generation is grateful." Susha smirked and waved his hand. "Don't rush to say thank you first, although I have taken care of each other, but those who are too low level in the realm of consciousness, I'm afraid we can't escape this." Shun Jian Wushuang sank in his heart and hurriedly urged Shentong to prepare to awaken everyone, but thinking about his own, Shentong might not be able to awaken them. Even if he urged the blood of the original source in his body, he tried to wave to several people. The result is not the same. With the blood of the origin, blood waves, giant axe, Lan, and cold as a few people took the lead to wake up. Visit the Lord of the Wushuang Palace. When Xingbue Supreme and others were looking at Xiong Zhenshuang, they immediately turned around and worshipped on one knee. Do NT use those red tapes anymore? www.mtl Novel. Jian Wushuang closed his hands to signal their rise. Bloodwave Supreme shook his head, and 2 tears burst into his eyes. Old man thought that we could only drink and hate in that dark passage, and never thought we would reach this sad place safely. The universe is endless in my temple of life. Fu Jun Lung Rushuang couldn't hold back, and hurriedly wept into Jian Wushuang's arms and wept, I thought I would never see you again. Wu Jianshou rubbed the fairy's hair in his arms and whispered, I promise you, even if I die, I will never see you again. Most of the shrine disciples in the first cosmic boat woke up, showing the joy of the rest of the life after the disaster. Only Lan, who stood beside the Supreme Blood Emperor, calmed down and set his sights on the straight and thin figure behind Jian Wushuang. This is not the time for comfort. I want to count all the disciples to deal with the next thing. Jian Wushuang said. Cold nodded and nodded, leaving his arms. After staring at each other such as Zun Bo Zun and others, Jian Wushuang rushed to the other 2 cosmic boats. A moment later, Jian Wushuang used the blood of the origin to awaken the disciples in the other 2 boats. The disciples who went to the place of tragedy this time, there were more than 14,600 people, and nearly 3,000 people stayed in the Dark Channel forever. The other weaker disciples have also been more or less affected. Chapter 4583. The salvation of these magical universes ultimately saved so many deaths just after entering this tragic land, which made everyone's hearts clouded. I don't know if it's dull in my heart, or the essence of the blood has passed too much. When falling from the cosmic boat, the sword has fallen straight to the ground. Master of Wushuang Palace, Bloodwave Supreme and others hurriedly held up the falling sword Wushuang. Afterwards, the Bloodwave Supreme urged the magical power, shrouding the divine power to him, slowly soothing the meridians. Nothing. Jian Wushuang's expression recovered, and he waved his hand and stood upright. Immediately, he looked at the stop right in front of him and walked slowly. He solemnly arched his hands, and Jian Wushuang sank in a deep voice. The main sword Wushuang of the Palace of Life Palace, I implore the old man to let me wait in this sad place. The universe is huge, except here, there is no place for us to live. After saying this, Jian Wushuang's figure trembled slightly, as if he had emptied all his strength. The of the universe seals the virtual with his body, destroys the supreme soul, and turns into a blow to the sky, blocking the void universe, and the ancestor of Fengtian uses burning life to turn into a wall to seek a way for the magical universe. Everything these elders do is to save the last fire of the divine universe. In today's scene, everything in the beginning always came to mind, making Jian Wushuang even more sad. Of course, Shi Dianking's face slowly showed a smile. I have spent some time in this burial place, and someone will accompany me, but it doesn't look boring. As Yunkai Yuming, Jian Wushuang only felt the sorrow in his heart abruptly and arched with excitement. Thank you, old mister, the younger generation and others are grateful. Bloodwave Supreme and others were also very excited. Looking at each other, the original pressure was reduced a lot. No one dared to approach the sorrowful place of exploration, which was finally entered by the final salary of the divine universe, and the heavens were immortal. On the pitiful land full of bones and corpses, countless vast majestic divine power is still as agile as the Lord lived before his life. Each corpse is an independent existence. From time to time, divine power turns into everything and rises up, untiringly releasing the final breath. Because these divine powers that have existed since the desolation were too vast, even those who are invincible and supreme blood, tentacles, giant axes, and so on, are struggling to walk, let alone nearly 10,000 people who are far weaker than the supreme life shrine disciple. Every step they take, just the evolution of the undivided divine power, is enough to break each disciple's meridians. When he reached the 100th step, nearly 3,000 disciples of Life Shrine fell to the ground at the same time. How is this going? Why can't I move anymore? The 3,000 disciples sitting on the ground turned around one after another. What's going on? Jian Wushuang first noticed the strangeness in the rear, waiting to see so many disciples kneeling behind the ground. He froze for a while, then seemed to be aware of it, and rejoiced. The disciples kneeling on the ground listened to the order. From now on, you will immediately realize in place and absorb any divine power that rushes into your body. You must not resist. From now on, no matter whether it is thousands of years or thousands of years, we must keep our minds and practice with concentration. Bonggong Lord. The disciples of 30,000 yelled in unison, even though the spin was firmly in place and practiced separately. Hua Mang rose into the sky, but it was a bit of momentum. God never die, my divine power universe. Bloodwave Supreme eyes were reddish, sighed. Little guy, my understanding is really good. Shizhong smiled comfortably, and then moved on. Uncontrollable joy overflowed on Jian Wushuang's face. He realized that this place of tragedy would be the last chance for the entire magical universe to fight against the virtual universe again. Next, every 100 steps, there are disciples of 2,000 people who can't hold on anymore and sit still. The more you move forward, the more pure and powerful the derived godless power is. Huge corpses of gods accumulate, each raging divine power soars into the sky, and splits the space to survive. The puppet also has mottled and broken marks, like a mysterious rune, occasionally entangled on one of the corpses. Wu Jian Wushuang can vaguely recognize that it belongs to the breath of sermon, but now, it is already broken. Shi Rao is so, even as strong as the blood, he is extremely hot. I must know that it is a more horrible preaching of sermons, and even if you perceive a point, it is definitely more effective than spending hundreds of thousands of epochs. He followed and stopped, and more disciples of the temple sat down and realized. When Jian Wushuang heard Lanlan's voice, when he looked back, there was only the supreme of bloodwaves behind him, and there were less than 100 people such as King Nine Calamity. His wife Lung Wushuang also sat down and realized. Master of Wushuang Palace, Lanlan stood not far behind her, sweat beads dripped from her cheeks, and the pressure of divine restraint stopped her. I'll fight here and say goodbye to you. Lanlan arched a hand and laughed, and then sat down slowly. I hope today's goodbye will be another day. Treasure. Treasure. The two of them said goodbye. Lanlan's restless expression stayed in Jian Wushuang's mind for a moment, and then Jian Wushuang continued to lead Shuebo and others to move on. The majestic power went straight to the Xiaohan, and it seemed to be mixed with Shengrui chimming and Baoguang flowing. Intact divine soldiers began to appear, condensed flowing of blood that has been immortal for hundreds of millions of years, and at the same time, the power of more and more vast divine power is even more powerful. After the King Zhoujia walked for nearly 100 steps, he stopped and realized. Then came the Heavenly Supreme, the great axe realized in turn. Only sword unparalleled, walking in the middle of it, like a dragon swimming into the sea, not only did not feel the horrible pressure, but the more he moved forward, the more he walked on the ground. Master of Wushuang Palace, the old man also stopped here. Bloodwave Supreme stopped his steps, his eyes seemed to carry a fiery flame. The master of Wushuang Palace shouldered the god's shoulders. It is no longer possible to accompany the Lord, and I hope the Lord will forgive him. Wu Zhenshou did not say more, holding his hands with Supreme Bloodwave's arms, and sincerely said, the Supreme Bloodwave is waiting here. Whether it is 1 Zai or 100,000 Zai, I will definitely keep my responsibility in mind and make a breakthrough. In addition, Supreme Blood, you can also try to break through yourself. You know, there is no end, and Supreme has been proven. A few short words, like a bloodstained, made him tremble. Wu Jian Wushuang no longer talked, smiled and turned to keep up. Evening bells and long bells ring between heaven and earth, countless broken avenues circulate in ancient times, and are reflected in each other. With only a glimpse, you can find the splendor of their owners. Xuntiandi did not know if reincarnation, but from the top of Tianjiao, to the death of a trafficker, they all worked in the same galaxy and lake to prove themselves. Chapter 4584. At this moment, between the vastness of the heavens and the earth, there were only two figures walking slowly. One of them was young and straight, like a sharp sword with Tibetan fronts waiting to be opened. Another old man in white is also thin and straight, like a blunt sword with a sharp edge, converging Dao Taoguang. There is a broken avenue circulating in its entire body, and there are immortal soldiers converging in the thick soil waiting to be hidden, and the vast divine power of the domineering sky fills every inch of space. But Zhen Wushuang didn't have half-hearted enthusiasm, but he followed but stopped firmly and moved forward. From time to time, there are still avenues that have not been damaged, and they want to be close to Zhen Wushuang, and they are waved away by the front stop. Where is this going? Zhen Wushuang secretly said to himself, and at the same time began to look at the environment of Shino. Time is here without any passing value, everything seems to stop at the moment when it died billions of years ago. Why do people like you come here for this reason? He stopped and turned his head and asked. Zhen Wushuang was silent, and after a moment, he explained the catastrophe between the two universes. When it comes to the divine power universe has fallen, Zhen Wushuang no longer have the mood to continue to talk down. After he stopped listening to his narrative, he didn't make too much statement, but only issued a small sigh. Zhen Wushuang no longer felt much sadness in his heart. He had long understood that only the endless breakthrough to the top can protect everything he wanted to guard. Now, it is a great fortune. It's all about the magical universe, and Zhen Wushuang dare not relax in the slightest. Before I die, I will be ashamed of everything I do. Zhen Wushuang secretly vowed, his eyes became hotter. In the next march, even Zhen Wushuang, who was in a state of mind, began to get a little anxious. In such a majestic and mighty divine power, even if it was one day of realization, it was something that I had never dared to imagine before, but there was no sign of stopping at all, which made Zhen Wushuang's state of mind slightly shaken. He seemed to be able to see through his mind, and the sound of stoppage came to his ears. Is it too late? Wu Zhenshuang was embarrassed and said, ashamed. When he stopped, he raised his head and smiled, and then stretched his fingers forward. Don't worry, your way is just ahead. It is like seeing the moon and seeing the moon, everything changes in Zhen Wushuang's eyes. The godless power rose in the wind, and thousands of soldiers rolled on the ground straight into the sky, with billions of gods connecting them. The dazzling and magnificent divine power directly smashed the entire chaotic cloud, and the countless soldiers seemed to reopen their consciousness and roam freely above the sky. The next moment, like a galloping dragon, thousands of magic soldiers fell into the ground like a falling star. The supreme divine power spreads like a lotus flower, sweeping away completely to the ground. Zhen Wushuang's heart is terrified. If the divine power is plundered, let alone him, I am afraid that it will be difficult for the top supreme to survive. But the scene envisioned in his heart did not appear, and I saw that the stop was standing there like an epi, and one stroke with one hand was like a curtain, and the vast divine power swept across the ground suddenly surged into the sky like a giant sea gate. Boom! Boom! The supreme divine power collided with the upper sky like the most magnificent picture, the divine power dissipated by itself, and it turned into a star-shaped huamang slowly falling below the heavens and the earth. You are sacred, ancient, and chaotic. That is the charm that blends with the breath of eternity. Zhen Wushuang stood in place, holding back his inner shock and catching the falling huamang. When the huamang enters the water, it will naturally melt into the meridians just by sticking to the skin. This is the breath of the avenue. Zhen Wushuang was completely shocked. In huamang, almost like a rain curtain, every trace had a different avenue. Follow me. Shi Jiao smiled and stepped into the avenue composed of thousands of magic soldiers. Zhen Wushuang strong endured the fiery heart, strode directly to this good fortune. He was only the first step, and his feet were pierced by a powerful gun. Zun Shen's blood dripped down the tip of the gun, but Zhen Wushuang's figure just shook slightly, then proceeded firmly. Every step he took, the sharp soldiers would easily tear every inch of his skin. Bian Yingrun's blood was pouring from the soles of his feet and calves. However, Zhen Wushuang did not feel as if he did not feel any stagnation. He was like the most devout and firm worshipper, stepping forward step by step. Behind him, on the avenue composed of divine power, a layer of shining blood was left. Zhen Wushuang is supporting. The soldier, who can cut even the soul, left deep marks on his feet and calf, and the pain in his body was far less than 1/10 of the pain of his soul being cut. The flesh and blood on the sole of the lame foot was cut, and the deepest part of the skin was exposed. The firm state of mind began to shake, and the figure of the stop was ahead. Jen Wuxuang felt so distant. I can't help but persevere. For those seniors who have died, I can live. They are all in exchange. Even if I really want to die, it will surely die on the battlefield. Wu Jian Wuxuang only felt that his mind was open and clear. The pain of the original spirit being cut seemed to have been reduced a lot. I said to Supreme Master Xie, I will fight to break through. That is an oath to others, but also to myself. He seemed to be in pain, his face paled with a smile. An even more incredible scene appeared. Jen Wuxuang began to let go of his feet, and moved from the original to the running. Like a lotus flower blooming on the avenue of divine power, a thin but firm figure was running forward. I do not know how long it took, only to feel that the huamang in the sky had dissipated, and the sky was back to chaos. Only a splendid avenue is immortal in this sad and humble place. The various horror divine powers are like giant pillars, propping up this unknown tragedy. The derived divine powers seem to be attracted by some kind of power, instead of being excluded, but divided into numerous influxes where they are needed. When a pair of feet that have no stick of flesh stick to the end of this immortal avenue, even if they wait for a long time, they can't help it. The hem of the robe was completely cracked, and the blood seemed to be completely drained. Only those eyes that are still as immortal as the stars have stopped. He paused and said, I can feel a stronger force in your body. Why not release it to help you move forward? Qi Jian Wuxuang did not speak, and slowly shook his head, then couldn't hold it anymore, and fell to the ground. Chapter 4585. I wonder if it is a dream or an illusion. He reached out to open the avenue of God's understanding in Jen Wuxuang's consciousness. At the moment Kai opened, she suddenly woke up. You are awake, little one. She stopped and stood on the dojo constructed by divine power, looking at Jen Wuxuang with relief. Qi Jen Wuxuang stood up with one hand and stood up instantly. What is this place? Looking at the huge square built by the vast divine power under his feet, Jen Wuxuang has not yet responded. Here, this is where you should be aware. She smirked. Wu Jian Wuxuang is not lacking in understanding, but was only mentioned a little bit and realized instantly that the people who built this doctrine were all the supernatural beings who left behind. Thank you, Mr. Old. Jian Wu doubled his fist, admiring even more when he looked at the stop. Su Shi stopped clapping and said, This is just the best place for you, but the final practice depends on your own creation. Yes. Jen Wuxuang promised. When he was about to cross-legged practice, he was stopped. Little guy, this practice has little effect on you. He paused and then raised his right hand and raised it gently. At the time of his ascension, the Tai Luo divine sword hung behind Jen Wuxuang rose to the sky, hovering over his head as if possessing a sage. The practice is the process of continuous seeking and preaching. You have touched that level faintly, and I will give you a little insight. Su Shi stopped talking quietly, but every word like a hammer, smashed into Jen Wuxuang's mind. Since chaos has not opened, when the heavens and the earth are still one, chaos is the Tao. Chaos turns into two turbid airs, and these two airs are two roads. Until the great world is opened, and the poverty is endless, the Tao will increase. The Tao is not extreme, but it is extreme. Some people have a glimpse into the mystery and prove themselves. Some people are so poor that they cannot touch that meaning. Little guy, although you already have a complete Tao, it is not yours, but in your current state, you can realize that trace of meaning, which is rare. All I can do now is to keep you in the way of your heart and keep your mood. In a few words, Jen Wuxuang seemed to feel something, but it was fleeting. He almost blurted out, Mr. Old, what you say in your mouth, where can I go if I master it? Step. I didn't care about Jen Wuxuang's pride, and stopped and said, Supreme Existence. Boom. In God's consciousness, it is like blowing up a thunderbolt, and Sword Wuxuang can no longer be calm. He directly reached out for a move, starting with the Taro Excalibur, and the irresistible power surged. Holding the Tai Luo Excalibur, Jian Wushuang is like a sharp sword out of the sheath, showing its sharp edge. Yes, the power is sharp, it seems to have some insight into kendo. Shijiao seemed somewhat satisfied. Qi Jian Wushuang groaned a little, then firmly said, "Old gentleman, I think I have roughly understood the inner mood of my heart, and determined to enter the Tao with a sword." Suddenly, he nodded and motioned for the sword unparalleled. He is in this vast and mighty divine doctrine, and the divine power he has lost can be replenished almost instantly. The old sword Wushuang is no longer reserved, and the chaotic domineering body is directly opened. Yongyi. Wu Jian Wushuang directly exhibited the first form of Tai Luo sword code, and the fiery black gas poured from the sword body, transforming into a black ball form and stopping at the time. He has the blessing of immense divine power, which is just the first form of this sword code, and his momentum and power are several times better than before. When the black ball was about to hit the stop, the space was slightly delayed, and then the black ball was divided into two from the center, which turned into black smoke and dissipated. For this situation, Jian Wushuang did not have any accident, and directly brought the third type of sword to dusk. Suddenly, with the time stop as the center, the pits that should have been broken and collapsed did not appear. Instead, a burst of repulsion forced the sword to fly without double-clicking. He walked back dozens of feet, and the sword unparalleled stabbed the ground to stop the receding body, and the blood in his body rolled violently. With a choked sweet in his throat, he slowly got up. Rather than having no effect on the time, Duan Zhendian dusk, but the repulsive damage was fed back to Jian Wushuang, which made him extremely depressed. From time to time, he stayed where he was from beginning to end, moving even one step. Looking at his light and light wind, I'm afraid he hasn't even tried hard. Qi Jian Wushuang adjusted his mentality, took a deep breath, and quietly gave birth to the fourth style. 4 seasons. The quiet and silent Hanmang emerged from the soles of Jian Wushuang's feet, with the blessing of the mighty divine power of the dojo, which swept the entire dojo almost instantaneously. In this mode, even the divine power that supports the operation of the dojo has a momentary stagnation. It's now. Wu Jiansu suddenly jumped, the divine power was completely poured into the Tai Luo divine sword, and he went down in the air and stopped violently. Jab's cut, which can almost tear the cosmic dome, left only a pale mark in the air of this sad place. By the time this sword mark cut in front of Shizhan, there were almost only inches. After a while, stop and stretch out the in the middle of the food, and just gently pinch the sword mark that was cut, directly killing her. The first shot was stopped, and the sword Zhenshuang who had fallen to the ground did not stop. When the sole of the foot stepped on the ground, he ran directly to the stop. Suddenly approaching, a free Tai Luobao shriek in the heavens and the earth emerged from behind Wu Zhenshuang. All the previous moves are serving this moment. The huge treasure looks like a mountain. With the sword of Wushuang, it is down. OM. A slight collision sounded quietly. Time seemed to stop. The virtual image of Wu Tailuo Supreme even had time to retreat. The sword Wushuang was still hanging in the air, the sword in his hand stopped at a distance from the palm of his hand, but it was hard to get half an inch. Shizhe still stood in place, with the palm of his right hand raised above his head, as if holding a sword generally blocked Jian Wushuang's strongest blow. The person who created this set of swordsmanship has a lot of experience. If he refines it further, he can be regarded as truly mellow. Shi paused quietly, and seemed to be a little sorry, pushing his right hand slightly upwards. In a hurry, as the tide receded, the sword flew out without double-clicking. The stoppage of the strike seemed to be as windy as the wind, but it really grabbed him and almost made him lose the ability to resist directly. Turning swiftly, Jian Wushuang spit out a large mouthful of God's blood directly, and the Taro Excalibur, which had not left his hand, also slanted into the side. An unprecedented sense of powerlessness struck my mind, and the last time this powerlessness belonged to my own virtual who broke the universe to kill. Suddenly, he stopped with his hands on his shoulders and walked slowly towards the sword unparalleled. Who wrote this set of swordsmanship? Wu Jian Wushuang slowly got up, stood with the Tai Luo divine sword, is the Tianjiao predecessor in my divine universe. It's a heavenly pride to be able to understand this sword technique, But why doesn't he refine this sword technique further? That's because the predecessor who created the sword cannon has already disappeared. Jian Wushuang said sadly. Chapter 4586. He paused and nodded. That's it, but it's a blessing that this sword can be passed down. I waited for Sword Wushuang to speak, and stopped and said again and again, separated from chaos, the heavens and the world were born. Although there are thousands of swords, there is really a sword-like sword that can communicate with you. Qi Jian Wushuang Yi, obviously also thinking about this issue. When he tried to talk about Tai Luo Jian Dian, he didn't say anything. Hey, yeah, Tai Luo Jian Dian Ba Ju Qiao has the power to easily break the stars, but does it really fit his own mind? Even if the inheritance is immortal in his own hands, even if he can exert the power of Tai Luo Jian Dian, but it is only the supreme kendo of Tai Luo. Stop talking and say, you need to be clear about every word I say. Your perception of kendo is far beyond what you think, but even if you can see through every kendo and blend in, they are still not yours. Every kendo will belong only to the person who created them. From the moment you practiced this sword classic, in fact, you left a slight sword mark in your mind, and this sword mark is a gap. All you have to do now is find your own kendo. At the same time, his right hand fluttered in the air, and the invisible but tangible waves could make Jian Wushuang look at him. Although there was nothing in the hand that stopped, the sharp intangible breath made Jian Wushuang clear. That is an invisible sword, which belongs to the kendo that stops by itself. Wu Jian's unparalleled heart surge, when the Tai Luo divine sword is about to be placed on one side, as time goes by, I will realize the mood that is gradually forming in my heart. There is no glorious sword meaning, some are just the purest one-stroke one. I've been looking for my own kendo, but it's always fleeting, and am afraid that the kendo I realized is incomplete, and it has been put on hold until now. Now I don't run away anymore, even if the sword code would be incomplete, but I don't regret it. Qi Jian Wushuang opened his eyes violently, and Jin Yunhuamang escaped from his eyes. Stars and godliness began to gather around the palms where Hagai originally raised the wind. One frame at a time, slow to the extreme action is like breaking down the sword in mind. The complex and mysterious to the extreme pattern began to appear around the sword Wushuang. Yang Shijian had already left Jian Wushuang far away, and looked at him comfortably from a distance. Melting in all heaven and earth, standing outside. Into the sword. Suddenly, the bright divine patterns floating around the body, all gathered under the palm of the right hand of Jian Wushuang. The invisible sword body, the divine power as the hilt, the long wind condensing the blade, and the pattern in the meantime, a very strange but wanton long sword appeared. This is the sword form of Jian Wushuang. It is very different from the previous one, but it is better than the previous vast sword. Even if he had held the Taro Excalibur in his hand and released a sword to break the might of the sky, he never exudes endless magnificent repression as he does now. The long hair breaks the girdle and dances behind him. The pale golden eyes flow out of the glorious woman, like the presence of God, exuding endless power. For the first time, the magical powers of Wu Fuyu around the dojo gave birth to agitated breath. The unpowered divine power derived from Zun seems to feel the sword meaning in the gestation, and he is mad from the quartet and wants to be integrated with it. Suddenly, he waved his hand and added a barrier to the outside of the dojo, blocking worship without subjective power. The long sword with the engraved gold pattern is held high above his head. At this moment, the sword Wushuang seems to be turned into a sword, and a hazy treasure phase occupies half of the dojo. I have a sword. I would like to invite Mr. Jin now, let's have a look. Shun roar emanated from his chest, and he took off the shape of the sword. Huge treasures are also in shape. The sword full of sacred ritual is a kendo that belongs to the sword unparalleled. Endless shining golden pattern helps the storm rise, and with that sword's potential, it blooms completely. The next moment, the dojo built by divine power trembled, and the shape of the sword came straight. The almost indestructible dojo suddenly tears long natural marks, and at the same time the remaining dojos fall apart quickly. Suddenly, he stopped at the center of the sword's reach, and the handicapped barrier of magical power was almost immediately swallowed up. When the entire dojo was torn in half by the cracks in the heavens, the disappearing dazzling golden divine pattern suddenly turned into a mongju rising from the bottom of the dojo and eventually swallowed up the entire dojo. The most magnificent and sacred blast lasted for 10 full breaths, and finally ended in a body shape. The divine power Huamang was scattered, and the dojo that was damaged by such a worldly attack slowly emerged. Countless divine powers turned into silk threads to hold the sword unparalleled, and the damaged dojo spilled everywhere like stars. Thousands of mythical soldiers below the dojo also trembled at the same time, seemingly unable to restrain the display of divine power. Laying on top of the divine power, Jian Wushuang's breath was breathless. Although the lost divine power was filled up instantly, the painful meaning of directing to the soul still made Jian Wu dazzled. He is just this kind of prestige, and he is almost drawn to death. If it is displayed in the universe where the divine power cannot be quickly replenished, I am afraid it is a time of fate. Su Shi's figure reappeared, standing on a shard and heading towards Jian Wushuang. Is this your kendo? Shi paused asking. Jian Wushuang stunned, then proudly said, this is my way. Su Shi Qingqing's face began to show a smile only said 4 words, it is absolutely stunning. Mr. Xie Laro advised. Jian Wushuang arched, expressing joy. Suddenly she laughed, my advice is not very useful, everything is what you think and realize. Wu Jianshou shook his head, it is precisely the teachings of the old gentleman that I can dare to take that step, otherwise I'm afraid I will never stand still. When he paused his head for a moment, Jian Wushuang's sword that was so amazing and brilliant was already fully aware of the dazzling sword issued by his own kendo. Since then, he will surely become more and more fused on his own avenue. What is the extreme state of kendo, do you know? Jian Wushuang groaned for a moment, then said with some uncertainty, human and sword united. Invisible? Hidden front cover? Su Shi stopped laughing and laughed, he did not refute or agree with Jian Wushuang. Numerous divine powers have sprung away from the foot of the stop, or turned into a butterfly, or chased birds. He slowly extended his palm, a bird chasing at his fingertips, flapping his wings up and down. When the bird is willing to stay at the tip of your sword, everything is done. After saying this sentence, the body of the stop turns into a cloud of smoke, and it naturally disperses. He dissipated with him, and there was endless vast divine power. Old gentleman. Jian Wushuang stood up holding his body, and looked where the disappearance stopped. Chapter 4587. If it wasn't for the broken dojo slowly being constructed, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang would really take all that happened as a dream. After chanting again and again for a few times, Jian Wushuang returned to God. This old man, who is also a teacher and friend, after a period of time together, is deeply imprinted in the heart of Jian Wushuang. What Shi Tzu did is almost equivalent to saving the last fire of the entire magical universe. Facing the direction where the stoppage disappeared, Jian Wushuang bowed deeply. I have proved my own kendo. Jian Wushuang only feels that the sense of powerlessness facing the future is rapidly weakening, and his future is quickly opening. When Jian Wushuang looked at his realm subconsciously, he couldn't help exclaiming. It turned out that, unknowingly, the, which belongs to the middle supreme, disappeared, as if it was a matter of course, directly promoted to the top of the supreme. Sui, who even needs thousands of years to break through, has unexpectedly made a breakthrough. Jing Ning shook hands and felt the resurgence of the mighty power. Jian Wushuang swept away the previous tiredness, and quickly sat down and stabilized. I broke through the complete realm directly, which had never happened before, and he had to deal with it carefully. After the supreme peak, it is the supreme. When Wu Wuhua meditates, the infinite power reappears to float around him like a flood of water. The general cultivation environment of this blissful heaven is just a general tailor-made for Jian Wushuang. While easily stabilizing the realm, it can also distract and consolidate the kendo you just realized. Jian Wushuang, who was extremely sensitive to the meaning of the sword since he was a child, already knew how terrible his first form of kendo was. The power of the first form is the power that the taro of the last form of taro sword can be used. The two are comparable, even more than the Tai Luo Jiandian. Jian Wushuang has not dared to imagine the upper limit of his kendo. This is my own kendo. Naturally, it should be called Wushuang, but how should Jian be named? Jian Wushuang thought about it, and then he had an answer. It's called Zingahuhai Jian, swordless eyes scorched, setting the name of the supreme sword code that shocked the world in the future. After re-evolving kendo several times, Jian Wushuang fell into a deep sleep with satisfaction. High Supreme is not his goal. Even if he did not enter this sad place at the beginning, the minimum requirement set for himself is Top Supreme. In fact, what he said to Bloodwave Supreme was also spoken to himself. He was originally the top and supreme goal he pursued, but now he has set this goal in a state that was almost unthinkable before. Only if you break through yourself can you win. Everything the vain universe will do today will be returned thousands of times. Broken Avenue with the vast divine power flowing around the already asleep Jian Wushuang, from time to time, a little rune hidden into his clothing. In this sorrowful land shrouded by endless divine power, every humble but tenacious breath continued to thrive. Every disciple in the Palace of Life has fallen asleep for a long time, but from the tight brows, we can see that none of them relax. The humiliation of a bereavement made everyone try their best to break through. From time to time, only a cosmic boat sighed. The short-formed river spirit sat on the railing and looked at the vast place of sadness and glory. His eyes were dazzling, and he didn't know what was thinking. Extremely north of the universe, starry sky. For hundreds of millions of years, there have been no stars in the sky. At this moment, there are nearly 100 extreme divine powers. In front of these powerful supremes, the 9-headed zombie gods opened their pupils together, staring closely at the sight wrapped in chaos and mighty power. This is the forbidden area where the ants in the divine universe fled. The grotesque voice of the murmur resounded from the mouth of the zombie. On the side of the side, the emperor of the god of refining god nodded, and his face looked ugly. Only then did they let them escape. Since their ants can get in, why can't you get in? The zombie looked at 8 Desolation. Yin Yin said, did you really get in, or did you let them go through the enemy? At that time, Yao Huangzun's face was even more ugly, and Shuli was released directly. What do you mean? The zombie was furious, and the more horrifying virtual force directly crushed it, as if the realm of the abyss of the heavens almost ran to kill. When the 8 desolate gods were about to burst into a virtual explosion, a figure with a thick smoky body appeared, and they shot directly to suppress the supernatural powers of the 2 snakes and the 8 desolate gods. It's you again, eat one. The zombie was furious, and his 9 heads shouted in unison, do you really want to oppose this seat? The black smoke dissipated, taking a look at the zombie and smiling coldly, stupid. You don't deserve to be opposed to me. Now the 2 universes are at war. You privately beheaded the gods and clans of this universe, really, when the entire virtual universe is you, whatever it take. You. The zombie was dumb, and was brought into a hi-hat out of thin air, which made him speechless, and he stopped speaking after a cold hum. One day, I'm going to blast your head into dregs. Zombie secretly resents. Qi Yenny no longer said much, and his eyes changed from the place of sadness to the emperor's ancestral site on the other side. I want to kill all the possibilities or impossible in the bud, all of them will die in my hand. A glance glanced at the cold, then 2, 3 and so on emerged behind him in turn. If you want great creation, will follow me and go to the emperor's ancestral site. After uttering this sentence, Yang first took the phagocyte to the emperor's site. The face of Shu Bahuang Shuzun is still ugly. He didn't look at the zombie god, and directly followed him with a group of Shuzuns. The remaining vanity was about to move, but he was afraid of the zombie and did not dare to leave. Finally, an Erkan Shuzuan dared to step forward, and before he spoke, he was shattered into blood by the snake god. Sooner or later, one day, I will slaughter you up and down, Zombie said fiercely, and then ordered the remaining Shuzuan to go directly to the emperor's ancestral site. The cataclysmic battle between the 2 sides of the universe, even if both the of the universe and the of vanity, disappeared, there was no sign of stopping, and the ancient grievances accumulated, as if finally there was a vent, and it was out of control. 25,000 years have passed. The sorrowful land is immutable, the infinite divine power is still vast, and even the derived divine power is more full. Covered by the divine power in the outermost part of this pathetic place, 3,000 figures stand still like a sculpture. Each of them has the same appearance as 5,000 years ago, and even because of the improvement of the realm, he has to become much younger. The lives of these disciples were completely closed, and it was only 10 years before they exhaled a suffocation, and then went back and forth, undergoing a complete transformation. Lying on the railing, it seemed that she had fallen into a sleeping thin figure, and suddenly jumped up. Chapter 45-88. Regarding the breath of all things, I am afraid that it will be difficult for anyone to compare with this thin and even awkward figure. I was silent for nearly 5,000 years, and the Lord Helaing jumped up and fell to the ground like a fish. I was in front of him, the first group of Life Shrine disciples to meditate to this day. Blowing his nose, Heling's small eyes widened arrogantly. It seems that the enlightenment of these disciples who are closest to them is about to melt. He seems to confirm Heling's speculation. A long breath revolves from the whole body of a disciple, and at the same time, nearly 1,000 long breaths recover at the same time. The character of Luo Heling shuddered, and ultimately dominated the realm. That is the breath that belongs to the ultimate realm. If it is just the breath of the ultimate dominator, it is naturally difficult to comprehend the magical eyes of the river spirit in the river, but now it belongs to the breath of the ultimate dominator, but it has reached 3,000. What kind of concept is that? Only the disciples of the 3,000 temples who stayed in the outermost layer, only after 5,000 years of enlightenment, they have reached the ultimate dominance as if they had exhausted their lead. This is just the disciples at the outermost periphery. What about disciples who are one step ahead? Luo Heling turned back from the previous shock, rising from the bottom of his heart with uncontrollable excitement. He knows that the entire divine power universe, the Temple of Life, has been saved. As soon as he thought about this, Heling could no longer fall asleep, and rushed to the deepest place like a child. He had to take a good look. The little guy who was eternally proud and growing all the time would give him what a surprise. However, just when he was raising his feet and preparing to leave, Heling realized that enlightenment was ethereal, and he and heaven and earth were one thing. If he disturbed himself, the consequences would be unthinkable. He thought for a second, and Heling gave up, and said with a lip, "Forget it, don't bother the kid first, it's not too late to talk until he breaks through." After he made up his mind, Heling jumped into the spacecraft, stared at two small eyes, and observed the disciples who were about to wake up. As the breath of ultimate became richer and purer, the 3,000 disciples on the outermost side woke up at the same time. God, I have reached the ultimate. I actually reached that state. How many years have you cultivated, and it's really terrible to reach such a state. From the beginning, he didn't believe his disciples and fell into ecstasy, and then he wanted to move on. However, at this time, the coughing sound from the spacecraft attracted the attention of 3,000 disciples. "Yes, Lord Helaing. I won't be dazzled, Lord Heling is not dead yet." Listening to the noise, River Aura almost jumped off the deck. "Enough. Who said that your adult Helaing is dead? I tell you, even now I can live in Feng Shui even if I am stuck in a virtual universe," said the insignificant little old man with his hands on his hips and his beard staring. Then he said earnestly again, "Okay, you have to shut up, Lord Heling. You do want to go forward now, stay here safely, do disturb the remaining disciples' practice, you have just been promoted to the ultimate master. Be sure to be stable, don't forget, the realm above you is the realm of clouds and mud." Luo Helaing's remarks made the 3,000 disciples instantly hot. How could they not understand that the supremacy was vain? In other words, there is a war between the two universes. At present, they are still at best dead cannon fodder. They have no effect. Only when they are on the Supreme Court can one or two enemies be buried before death. Now in such a great place, even if it is a second of vain, it will never be allowed. The disciple with a good mood immediately sat down again and started a new round of realization. The other disciples also entered the country again after investigating their own situation. The divine power of the universe fell. As the final salary, the expectations and missions they shoulder will force them to grow. I waited for all the disciples to sit down. He Ling returned to the previous position, and I stared at the chaos but couldn't see the sky. When will all this happen? When will it be back on track? After another 1,000 years, the second batch of disciples began to recover, and they also reached the ultimate dominant state, and even individual disciples with deep understanding began to touch that level of barriers. After Luo He Ling stepped up and conducted some preaching, they continued to enter the perception. Hey, it seems that they are inseparable from me. He Ling sighed, raising his hands behind his back and preparing to patrol again. As He Ling turned around, a majestic beam of divine power rose up. Although it was particularly inconspicuous in this vast divine power, it made He Ling tremble. The concussion that symbolized the achievement of supremacy was raised among the third group of disciples who sat down and realized. Next, the second supreme divine power rose. The third way. The fourth way. Seventh. A total of 7 supreme divine powers rose to the sky and soon returned to peace. He did not cause any thunderous thunder, heaven and earth strange sounds, and some were just symbols of the supreme divine power. The 7 disciples who obtained the supreme avenue first stood up and looked at the supreme divine power that emerged from their bodies in disbelief. Certified supreme. One of the older middle-aged disciples murmured softly, and when he saw the true supreme power rising from the wind, his eyes turned red instantly. It seems that the magical universe has really been saved. He inspired, a gratification that was very different from his acting style was revealed from his eyes. The sorrowful land doesn't know how time passes, but the boring river spirit counts the days every day. Then, at this time of 8,000 years, the heavenly supreme regained consciousness. The immense divine power rushed straight up into the dome, the divine supreme divine power became deeper, and finally settled in a half-step invincible supreme. 28,000 years ago, it broke through the real natural divide. The true invincible supreme will only be a matter of time. Immediately following the awakening of the Emperor Tianxian, there is also the supreme axe. He also took that step, reaching a half-step invincible supremacy. The two encouraged each other, entrusted He Ling a little, and again had a second perception. In the meantime, Jian Wushuang's wife Leng Rushuang had awakened, successfully broke through the barriers of the realm, and stayed in the state of elementary supremacy. So far, there are only 3 people who have not yet awakened from the perception. Bloodwave Supreme, 9 Calamities King, Sword Unparalleled. The unpowered divine power, like the derivation of spiritual wisdom, no longer wanders aimlessly, or hundreds of beams rush to the supreme, or rush to the king of 9 calamities like a wave. But more unpowered divine powers are rushing to the center of the entire sad and humble land, with the divine powers remaining in the ancient times of all parties. Chapter 4589. There, it is the dojo that belongs only to Jian Wushuang. The is spontaneously constructed into a dome by various supreme divine powers, and the charm is filled with the whole dojo from top to bottom, shining golden and brilliant. Beneath the dojo, there are thousands of magic soldiers who act as the cornerstones and inject the charm into the dojo together. At the center of the huge dojo, a very thin figure was sitting there, and the wide black robe on the upper body was torn by the mighty divine power, exposing the exquisite figure showing the divine pattern. The tadpoles seemed to be scattered with pale golden hair and hang down on the ground, like the Milky Way starfall. Taro's Excalibur stands on one side, the blade clears in the sheath. For 8,000 years, Jian Wushuang has maintained such a posture for 8,000 years. The vast divine power poured into the body from every pore, and nourished every inch of meridians. Every 100 years, Jian Wushuang spit out a cloud of breath, and then went back and forth. Wu Gang's unparalleled kendo was re-exercised for 2,000 years. For the past 2,000 years, he has given out his sword in the consciousness all the time, closed his sword, and perfected the perfect harmony of the swords, rivers, seas, and swords. Until the 3,000 years, Jian Wushuang reluctantly constructed the entire Xinghe Lake, Heiyi, and Zhenyi into a frame, and the first form of his battle with the time stopped had only one of the simplest star characters. Although the meaning of a single word is simple, they eventually merged together to cover an endless universe. This is the kendo of Jian Wushuang and his ambition. When the whole kendo was sharpened, Jian Wushuang, who was in the chaos consciousness, wanted to start by opening the gift given to him by the predecessor of the palace. I don't know if it's the same breath, or if he shakes his hands. When opening up Dao Yang's spiritual practice, the feeling of the universe also opens at the same time. Two majestic spiritual insights that are so majestic that they can't be added, directly faint them. I passed away for another 2,000 years. Ha ha, happy, happy. A loud laughter trembled in the trembling dome, and a thick and restrained divine power surged like a water dragon, completely spreading in the sky. The great Axe Supreme who reperceives again wakes up. And this time waking up, he has reached the incredible invincible supreme state. Just for 2,000 years, the great Axe Supreme has been invincible from half a step, reaching the true invincible state. Originally required tens of hundreds of chaos, and now it only takes 2,000 years. I am afraid that since the beginning of chaos, it is hard to see an example. The giant axe who invaded the invincible supreme divine realm, swept away the previous fatigue. His eyes were like bright star fields, exuding a glorious huamang from the inside and the solemn treasure. Immediately afterwards, the heavenly supreme regained consciousness and went straight into the invincible supreme god's realm. The two old friends who are not knowing how many chaos periods accompanied each other and smiled, their eyes were wet. Because of insufficient strength, the temple of life has been repeatedly humiliated. Because of insufficient strength, the divine power universe has fallen, and countless days of arrogance have been destroyed. Only by constantly breaking through can we protect what we want to protect. Heaven, the giant axe smiled proudly. You and I are now in the invincible supreme state of God. How about fighting today? That's what it is. Tianyi laughed loudly, and the bow of the that utterly destroyed the sky quietly appeared in his hands. The giant axe retreated hundreds of feet at once, and at the same time countless godless powers began to build a dojo. In the Xiao Xiao dojo, the two statures instantly erupted into an invincible supremacy. The incomparable vast divine power no longer escapes the world like half-step invincible supreme, but emerges in the whole body as if possessing the intellect, and is quite restrained. Two invincible extremes start the most hearty battle. God bowed tightly, using his own divine power as an arrow, and shot out in an instant, like a phoenix tail feather, swept towards the giant axe supreme. The giant axe greeted the storm, and the two hit each other heavily, and the resulting burst directly tore the dojo just constructed. Countless crystals of quiet huamang waited for the bow again, and shot at the giant axe with the laugh of the heavenly supreme. The giant axe is backed by an axe, and his body is transformed, and he is confronted with the supreme power with the potential of opening the sky. Crimson divine power against the crystal faint blue mansions, which belongs to the invincible and supreme power, shatters the dojo again and completely disperses in the heavens and the earth. Because the entire place of tragedy is constructed by more ancient and vast divine power, the supernatural powers of the giant axe and the heavenly supreme will be greatly restricted. Maybe it's because of Chongxiao's war intentions that disturbed the silent power. I began to woke up with some disciples with secondary perceptions. The disciple of awakening, at the very least, is the ultimate dominating realm, and at the same time, the new supreme divine power begins to appear. From the original 7 supreme divine realms, it began to increase to double digits, and still has an upward trend. Maybe she felt a certain kind of breath, and the coldness awakened from her perception, and a whole new kind of power rose from her meridian. The magnificent dark blue divine power rushed into the sky and then dissipated. Cold as frost, straight into the supreme divine realm. It's a bit noisy. A slightly lazy voice sounded, and Zhu Jiawang, with white shirt and white hair, awoke from his feelings. There is no wave breaking through the realm, and even the divine power is not exposed for half a minute, so that it usually seems like a good night's sleep. But the more the Jiujia King is, the more horrible it is. Like the magic sword that hides the front cover, it reveals its sharpness in plainness. A deep stream of streamer flowed from his eyes, a slight smile hung from the corner of his mouth. Is it possible to reach such a level of supreme power? If I am only half a point better. He only knew that the king of the 9 dragons, and it took him only 8,000 years to completely cross a great realm, and touched that more mysterious realm. He is confident that he will be invincible in a chaotic era. And that guy, what kind of Tianjiao attitude will he appear in? Zhoujia Wang Shen's pure eyes looked at the dojo in the chaos in the distance. Zun Lanlan awoke, she got the Tao under the seat of the cosmos, and she was already indifferent to the realm, and it was because of her mood that she made one jump to the highest peak of Tao. She is not too concerned about her advancement in her realm. From the moment she wakes up, Meimu is full of worries and looks at Jian Shuang's dojo. Unless the realm of divine power reaches the height of the universe, all personal strengths that cannot be weighed on the battlefield will be extremely weak in the face of decision-makers who can save the calamity. Suddenly, Lan Lan has already regarded Jian Wushuang as a decision-maker who can turn the tide. Although the divine power universe has long been occupied, the ever-increasing salary and wages are still growing under the pressure of the virtual universe. Everyone's eyes are converging towards the bright dojo. Together they are looking forward to that guy who has grown up tenaciously and never slacked off half a minute, creating a real miracle. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,